Would it shock you to know that we don't have a makeup artist on our team? I'm not terribly concerned about my appearance on these videos, but there is a concern I have for another appearance, which we find in 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 8. The Apostle Paul writes, "Finally, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing." You know, we think about getting dressed up to go out, but how do we prepare for going out of this world into the next? You know, Bible prophecy is there not simply to entertain us or to give us heated discussions. It's future events that reflect on our present behavior. And this verse talks about the effect that loving the appearing of the Lord Jesus will have on our future. Now, I believe every Christian loves the Lord. You can't help but do it. If you've met him, you love him. To know him is to love him. But this is something different, isn't it? When we talk about loving in the New Testament sense, loving always has a price tag. God loved the world and gave his Son. Christ loved the church and gave himself. So when we speak about loving his appearing, the question is, what does that cost me? How does that affect my life in the present? And I'd like to tell a little story. Some of you have heard this story before, but it illustrates the distinction between loving the Lord and loving his appearing. We were talking about this at breakfast today, my friend Butch and I, and he was asking this very question: what does this mean to love his appearing? The story goes like this. When I was a boy, you used to put a deposit down on soda pop bottles, 5 cents for the big ones and 2 cents for the small ones, and this was your incentive to take them back to be recycled because you got that 5 cents or that 2 cents back. Not a lot of money these days, but for a little fellow who got 50 cents allowance once a week, there was some real money to be had in taking back pop bottles. And we didn't drink a lot of soda pop at our house, but when there was a gathering of Christians, very often there would be some. And my father, showing obvious grace as a Scotsman to allow me to keep the money, he would let me, if I took the bottles back to the grocery store, I could get to keep the change. And so Monday after school, I loaded up my little red wagon with these bottles. There may have been a dozen bottles, I'm not sure. And I pulled it up to the grocery store. When I went in, I went to the kiosk where they return the bottles, and there was a lady there. There was a cart full of bottles, and she took my few bottles and put them into the cart. And she was just ready to tally up the amount that I had brought to give me the change when she was called away. And so she called another clerk over to look after me. When the clerk arrived, instead of the dozen or so bottles that I had, she counted up all the bottles in the cart, assuming I had brought them all, and she went to ring up this amount, which would have been a huge amount for a little fellow. And you know, I was a believer, but I began to rationalize, and I thought to myself, you know, it's not my mistake, and they can afford it. I'm not sure I got quite as far as thinking that I might give a percentage of it to the Lord to appease my own conscience. But nonetheless, she took the cash out of the register, and she was extending it to me, and I had my little hand out ready to take this money, when for some reason I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye, and I turned and I saw my Father walking towards me. Now, I loved my Father, but I didn't love his appearing. And the question is there some activity, some attitude, some habit, some place I haunt, some activity I'm involved in, that if I were to be at that stage, at that moment in my life when the Lord Jesus returned, would I love his appearing? Or would, as John speaks of it, would I be ashamed before him at his coming? The coming again of the Lord Jesus, next to the moment of my salvation, should be the happiest day on my calendar. Let's make sure that there's nothing that's getting in the way of the unbridled joy of seeing our heavenly bridegroom, our blessed Redeemer, our dearest friend, our champion, our hero, our co-heir, our eternal lover. And make sure that he will be able on that day to give me that which belongs to those who love his appearing.